Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Soundbites of Immigration Success. It is a pleasure to have you here with us. We bring this series to you so you can learn about your fellow colleagues, hear their story, hear their challenges, and how they might have overcome them. And a final takeaway piece of advice, or maybe more than one piece of advice, as you continue on with your own profession yourself. So I have with me today Tom Macleay. Hi, Tom. How are you?
Hi, Monica. I'm very well, thanks. And yourself?
I'm great. It's a pleasure to have you. Tom, tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you decide to become an immigration consultant.
First, I just want to let you know, Monica, how honored I am that you asked me to be on this podcast. It's the first time I've ever done a podcast, so I'm a little bit nervous. And the caliber of the people you've had on so far is so high that I really feel that I'm in good company and almost like I don't belong on this list of people. But so thank you very much for inviting me today. To tell you a little bit about myself. Well, my name's Tom Macleay. I'm a native of Alberta, Canada. I grew up in a small town just next to Edmonton, and I did most of my schooling in French there. And um, eventually, I pursued a career in music. So before I was an immigration consultant, I was an opera singer for about 20 years.
Wow.
And so what led me to that? Well, when I was a kid, I was very interested in music. Music was the only thing I was really keen on growing up. And when I found out I could study music at university, I decided to get serious about school and get some marks and get into school. So I trained as a classical singer, did an undergrad at the University of Alberta, which is in Edmonton, and really loved that. And following that, I wasn't quite ready for grad school yet. So I took a job in Japan teaching high school English. And I spent 2 years teaching English and getting to know Japan and learning Japanese and making all kinds of friends, having a really wonderful time there. And I followed that up with a master's degree at McGill in Montreal, which is more or less where I've stayed ever since. So following McGill, actually, I went abroad again to live in France. I lived in Marseille for a year, and I did a program called the CNIPAL, which is the Centre National d'Insertion Professionnelle d'Artistes Lyriques, which is a mouthful, which is why we have this acronym for it. So that was a bit like a training program, sort of like a finishing school for opera singers. And I trained with them for a year, and they introduced all kinds of directors of opera houses and impresarios to come in, and the goal was sort of hire us. It was a little bit like a Star Academy for opera singers, and I got to cut my teeth and made my European debut, sang at a bunch of houses down in the south of France and concerts and working with orchestras. Decided I didn't want to live in France. By then I had a wife and a young child and came back to Montreal. I did the apprenticeship program with l'Opéra de Montréal. So I was one of their young artists for 3 years. And that got me on stage. I sang in just about every production there. And by the end of that, I had enough contacts. My name was out there. I knew enough directors and conductors that I was able to launch my career in Canada and eventually, all internationally. So
As an opera singer.
as an opera singer, opera and concert.
Wow. Wow. So before we get on to the immigration consulting side, so what was gosh, what are some of your highlights of your opera career? Something that you're really proud of?
Oof. One of the things I always loved was contemporary music.
Right.
And I got to create a role. I got to debut an opera in Victoria with Pacific Opera Victoria with an American Canadian composer. And it was an adaptation of the play Mary's Wedding. So we did
Right.
that with Pacific Opera Victoria. It was recorded on CBC, broadcast Saturday afternoon at the opera. So that was one of the jewels in my crown, I would say.
Very.
I've
So
had so many great experiences.
do you still are you still in the opera world at all?
Not really. No, I kind of was getting out of it as my immigration study began. So it's a very special life. It's a unique life because It generally is a job that you travel to, unless you have a contract with a house full time, and that exists almost nowhere outside of Europe. You're traveling to every job, which is wonderful if you love to travel. And I do love to travel, and I love to visit other countries and meet new people. So that's why it was a good fit for me for a long time. But eventually I got a little tired of being away from my family so much. There would be months at a time where I wasn't sleeping in my own bed. So that got a little tiresome, and eventually I decided to transition out of it.
So I guess hence the immigration career. So is that how
Yeah.
you segued into immigration, sort of based on your experience in Japan and the needs there?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't wake up one day and say I'm going to be an immigration consultant. It happened a little more sort of by accident, right place at the right time. So my wife played a big part in this. So she has a background in education, and she was managing a language school here in Montreal. And a lot of the students, a lot of the international students would come to her. They would have done nearly the full plan of their study, let's say 11 months of a 12-month program, and they come to her in month 11 and say, I really want to stay, but my permit is up now. What can I do? And at that point, there's not a lot you can do. So she wanted to be able to help people like that plan and get organized and be able to follow through and pursue some kind of goal here locally. So she left the job at the language school, and she decided to open her own educational agency. And she became a certified ISEF agent and started helping people plan to pursue studies here in Canada. So in 2015, she launched that company with my help. I was always there in the background, but more as a sort of as an auxiliary person. I was there helping with settlement services and helping people get sorted out here. People are coming, of course, they need a place to stay. A lot of our clients come with families, so you've got to get their kids in school, just help them get set up for life here so that they can be successful. So I was doing all of that completely non-immigration work for a few years before I had any interest in learning about immigration, to be honest. So eventually, it was my wife that said, "Look, this is an interesting field. There's a real need for immigration consultants. It's a growing field, and I think you'd be good at it." So she sort of nudged me to get licensed, and I got my license and my RCIC license and my recognition with MIFI. And so I work now mainly in Quebec, a real focus on Quebec programs and immigration to Quebec and temporary residence in Quebec.
Wow, wow. I must say, out of all the people that I've interviewed, and I've had a lot of interesting stories, this is probably the most interesting. Well, you talk about something so diverse, from opera singer to immigration consultant. But on one hand, as an opera singer, you're providing such pleasure to the audience, and as an immigration consultant, you're providing information and a new life in Canada. So talk about full circle.
Well, I like to think there are transferable skills. When you're pursuing music as a career, you're sort of taking a shot, because most people that pursue music, even at a high level, don't wind up having any kind of career. So I feel very lucky to have had a 15-year career as a professional singer. Really making my earning my daily bread just with singing and hard work. And you always wonder, well, what am I learning here that anyone will ever hire me for in the future? And the phrase we hear is, "Oh, you'll have transferable skills that will be useful somehow." And I never imagined how what I was doing and learning through my craft would be transferable to something else. But now that I'm sort of made the full conversion, I look at the the deep, detailed work you do as a musician and as a singer. Opera, for example, is a complete art form. It's music, it's drama, and it's a visual arts, it's dance. It incorporates all of these art forms into one thing. And when you prepare for a role, for example, you have to learn the story. You have to know the language that you're singing in. You have to read all the background information you can. So you could be reading literature that's pertinent. You could be learning about history and doing word-by-word translations of all of your text and all the texts of all the other characters that are in this sung musical play that you're going to participate in. So they're very, very close and detailed study of a score. And I don't think that's a normal pursuit, but I see now how having that kind of attention to one thing for a long period really is something that informs my practice now.
Just in terms of, so you're taking that same pursuit of detail and review and encapsulating yourself in that role.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is my personality too. I'm that person who, when the bank teller slides over a slip for me to sign to take my deposit, I spend 3 minutes reading all the fine print. So I'm someone who's always liked to see exactly what I'm committing to, and to read all the fine print, and to really have an understanding of what's going on at a granular level. And
Except
I think that quality is useful in our profession.
Except that bank slip is online now.
Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting because so you're taking those skills and your detail and wanting to know the whole story. You're taking that to your clients where you want to know their story and what they want. And when you're putting everything together, you've got that attention to detail. But I guess you're probably really having those detailed conversations with your clients to understand what it is that they want and why that, and how can you assist and sort of take them through.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to get to know the clients really well and to find out what their goals are and what makes them tick and what they're really after, what their long-term goals are. And that really helps me to understand how to advise them and what sorts of pathways to help them set up. I'm really not a one-size-fits-all kind of consultant. I really want to be informed by the client or by the applicant, follow, make them, in some cases, make them take a decision as to what they're committing to.
Yeah, I really like how you've done a great job at telling us a little bit how your previous life has really informed your next life and how you've taken those skills. So before we came on air, you were saying that you're been an immigration consultant for 2.5 years, but your journey here, you kind of were working with your wife for a number of years. So now this is where you are. You're in Montreal. You're doing work with an education agency. You're working to get to know your clients. What for you then would you say has been your biggest challenge as an immigration consultant?
First of all, I just want to I'll underline one thing, and that's that around 2019 is when I really started being involved in the immigration matters, because that's when I was studying, and because our company already was working closely with an immigration consultant, I was able to get advice from him and work with him and find out how everything works. So that was an incredible advantage to have somebody to sort of walk with me all the way through my education, and give me little pieces of work that I could handle to assist with his files, so that I could get to know firsthand what all of this
and to make that decision, decide if you really wanted to do that piece. I mean, it's one thing to do settlement and assist in the sort of the life, like be a life coach, but it's another thing to take on the whole immigration piece, which is such responsibility.
Well, I mean, it's all integrated in my eyes, because especially people coming with their families, you really need to be involved in so many aspects of their life and decisions, that the big decisions that they're making. Because if you know what kind of education they want to pursue, what kind of education they want for their children, it really informs, okay, well, if that's the case, then you can live here, or you can do this. If you're going to study in French, or if you're going to study in English, you have to pursue this pathway. You may need an exemption from a certificate of eligibility in order to study in English, for example. So all these things have to be considered before you set in place an immigration path for, or even a temporary residence path for a primary applicant.
So lots of things to consider. So
Yeah.
so now where you are,
Mm-hmm.
so for you, what's been the biggest hurdle or a big challenge for you?
Well, I think for a lot of people, the figuring out what your niche is going to be could be a big hurdle. But in my case, I sort of knew that going in. I already had a pretty good idea of what my practice was going to look like, who my clients could potentially be. So I'm glad that was sort of somewhat clear to me from the start. But my biggest challenge, if I have to try and choose something, put my finger on it, I would say that growing my practice in a sustainable way. Because, as I said before, I really want to get to know my clients, what their goals are, where they're heading, and I want to be involved in their files and in their plans at a fairly detailed level. And that's something that does take time. You're not just, filling out a form and submitting an application. Really creating a plan, and it can be a long-term plan. So being able to grow my practice in a sustainable way where I can still have that level of involvement with my clients. So that's something that I've thought about a lot. How I can scale up my practice, because it's going really well, and I'm really happy with how it's going. But there's a finite amount of time that I have. There are only so many hours in the day. So if I wanted to 10x my company, if you're thinking as an entrepreneur and you want to grow your company, I don't know how I can do that with, and at the same time still maintain such complete control over every aspect of
Yeah,
my
yeah,
practice.
that's a really good that's a big challenge, and it's one
Mhm.
that you've identified, and it's one that I think a lot of immigration consultants who are at the stage that they are in their career where
Mhm.
they're busy and
Mhm.
they're really liking it. They
Yeah.
want to grow, but they also want to have that same client touch. And then you have
Mhm.
to start to develop where you have to sort of figure how do you marry the entrepreneurial side with your client services.
Mhm.
So, some bring in people who operate the business side for them, where they
Yeah.
do more of the client side. So yeah, so you're at so you're sort of finding a way to you're still dealing with that challenge. You're sort of figuring out next steps and how you're going to manage that,
Yeah.
I guess.
Because I'm in a place professionally that I like. I want it to keep going like this. But at the same time, I I I welcome more success and the growth of my practice, but I don't want to take on more than I don't want to take on so much that I won't be able to produce the quality
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I expect.
Yeah, well, hopefully somebody, Tom, listening today will
Hmm.
um hear your story and know that they're not alone. And it tells me that, here at CAPIC, we can work to provide some sort of networking or resources where you can have like-minded conversations with people who are maybe at
Hmm.
the same piece that you are, or they've made decisions and how they've gone to that next level.
Yeah.
So I guess my next question to you then is, what advice then would you give to somebody starting out now, or what advice would you give to yourself 2 years ago, 2.5 years
What
ago?
advice would I give to myself? Um, I think that the most important thing for me over the last few years has been the people I've been able to surround myself with, the people who've supported me through this journey. Um, and I'm talking about my friends and my family, of course, but also my colleagues, other people I studied with, of course, people that I've met through CAPIC, and that's been a real benefit to me, I think, to have people that I can lean on, and for personal support, but also for advice. As I mentioned before, I had a mentor who was able to bring me along the whole way. If you can find somebody that will take you under their wing and you're just starting out, that's probably the best way to go. Through CAPIC, I was able to meet a bunch of consultants who live right in my neighborhood, and it didn't happen right away, but eventually I was able to get to know some of them reasonably well, to the point that, I can go for coffee with them once in a while and pick their brains about things, and just know that I have other people around me that I could potentially pick up the phone if I were really in a jam, and they would help me out. And I think you have that through CAPIC as well, through all the networking that's available there, or through the forum. So here's my obligatory CAPIC plug for anyone who's not already in.
Oh,
the
and by the
family.
way,
Yeah.
I do not tell people to plug CAPIC. It's and almost to a T, I would say almost every single person has mentioned that, because
Yeah.
you're right. It's about building those networks and those relationships and leaning on the people when you need to. And by the way, Tom, we do have a nice networking in-person session coming to Montreal on December
Right.
1st.
I'll be there.
Yeah. So I guess my last question,
Mhm.
I didn't tell you what it was going to be,
Uh-oh.
but would you do it all over again? Would
Yeah,
you choose immigration consulting again?
for sure I would. Yeah, I really, really enjoy it. I don't enjoy every aspect of it, but I find it really fulfilling and challenging, and I'm learning every day. And I'm able to help people move forward in their lives. A lot of people come to me right when they're stuck, and they just need someone to get them unstuck. And so I'm very glad to be able to do that, and to help people to sort of fulfill their long-term success and meet their goals.
Well, Tom, I want to thank you for your unique story and your really thoughtful commentary on, just taking the time to share with us your thoughts. I think you're a fabulous representative of the young. Well, I don't know how young you are, but um, of the next generation of consultants, and I'm really proud to call you a colleague. But thank you again, Tom. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Monica.
And thank you to all of you out there. We'll look forward to seeing you at the next one.